aims of today's workshop are to explore different writing styles, to identify your story, to discover how to start your story, to plan your story in a really brief template way, and to kind of agree on some self-care tips when sharing your story. So what I'd like you to do in the chat is just think of some ground rules for today. It's a short one, but just some things that you think are really important for us to have as our ground rules, if that's okay. So let's have a look. What have we come up with? Any ground rules? So that can be things like respecting other people's opinion. I'll give you a minute to type. Have any come through on your end, Joy? I think maybe everyone's multitasking and getting themselves settled, so that's fine. Does anyone wants to say any ground rules? That's fine.
6:40.
Yeah, move in, move out, giving different identities to move in and to try and share different voices, often not shared, and move out if often voices are shared, or if one is usually sharing so everyone gets a chance. Okay, good point, thank you. Therese, Ella, I think that is, yeah. That's a good point, and I think it's really important that, yes, we all get a balanced view. This is a kind of like a group workshop, so it won't just be me talking, so it'll be really good to hear from everyone. We'll use a mixture of the chat and also video talk as well, so you're more than welcome to turn your mic off and contribute as well, that's fine, okay? Anyone else get any ground rules?
I've just put down what you said, really, just respecting people's differences.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, and just I suppose taking time with everyone. It's like I said, it's a Monday evening. People have had different responsibilities throughout the day as well. So yeah, good. Another one. Thank you, Jemima, being open to listening, to being accepting of other people and their experiences, which will influence their thoughts, perspectives, and they might differ from our own. Perfect. That's brilliant. And that's the thing, especially with telling your own story. It's such a sensitive subject. It's something that's personal to us, and so it's really, really important that as we go through that process of kind of taking care of ourselves, that we also take care of others as well, and their story. So I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint now and share that with you. And I kind of just want to introduce myself. I know for some they like to see it written, so I will have it written on the screen just to help as I'm talking as well. So my name's Naomi Williams. As I said, I'm an author. I'm also the founder of Sensory Learning and Play, and there's a bit there about my background and my experiences. At the moment, I've currently written and published 9 books, but I have 19 outstanding that are waiting to be published. So just finishing off the artwork and the animations for them really, and then they'll be ready to go. If you want any more information about me or anything I do, there's a link to my website there. I am extremely passionate about helping people, supporting them to reach their full potential. And that is despite and in spite of their past experiences and current barriers as well. So that's a bit about where my passion lies and where I'm coming from when I kind of do everything that I do. As you'll see, there's quite a few different things. So we're going to go straight into just a bit of content really about writing. There's 5 main writing styles. There's narrative writing, and this is characterized by a main character. So it's kind of like setting the scene, and it's about engaging with a specific problem or significant event. And I've put one of the books that I've written there, Shattered, as an example. There's also analytical writing, and it's around developing a thesis. Okay, it supports our main claim, and it's backed up with proof, evidence, sometimes statistics as well. So it's around research as well, sometimes primary and sometimes secondary research is in that. Another book there that I've written, He Said, She Said, with the relationship book, that was a lot around research and different couples and things like that. Expository writing, this is a description and explanation of a particular idea. A lot of people would link that with news articles and, you know, things that happen that are kind of like significant events, and it's like, oh, this has happened and I want to write about it, or a specific idea. And then we've got persuasive writing, which is a form of non-fiction writing that encourages careful word choice and the development of logic and argument. I put shameless there because that's kind of what I did in that book, where it was more about persuasion, and it's a book about mental health. So I use a lot of persuasive writing in that book to give people hope. And then there's the argumentative writing, which is the final main writing style that people usually look at. And that's a positional argument based on the results of research again. The book that I wanted to focus on there was A Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, which I think is a really good book on argument, based on argument. So the two main ones that I have highlighted there, as you can see, that are in bold, is narrative writing and persuasive writing, because I think when writing your own story and creating your own story, those are probably the two themes that you would use in your style. And there's different ways to tell your life story. I don't know why there's a red mark on there. So if you can see it, I can see it. I don't know what it is, but we'll ignore that for now. So we've got the biography, autobiography, and fictional autobiography. For me, when I wrote my book Shattered, that is based on my autobiography, but I did it in a fictional way. So I use fiction based on real life events. The biography can also be used, and that is when someone's life is written, but it's by someone else. And then the autobiography that we all kind of know well is an account of a person's life written by that person. Could I just have some feedback in the chat? When you were thinking about the different types of biographies or types of stories and your expectations of today, have you got any ideas that link to them? Was you thinking about that, or was there anything else that kind of came up?
Okay, well, we've got a question from Rachel. Would you say narrative writing would include biographies? I'm guessing.
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
yes, so brilliant. So exactly. So as I said right at the end, narrative writing is a link to biographies, definitely, and that's why those two were highlighted: narrative writing and persuasive writing as well. So what are your expectations then of today? Have you got any expectations or ideas of what you wanted from today out of this session? Anything that you're looking forward to, that you kind of been thinking about? You can write it in the chat or you can say it. It's completely up to you. Yes, Rachel, yes, journals as well. I'd say that they're very closely linked to narrative writing, but also I'd say they're biographies, really, autobiographies in the way that they're written.
I think for me,
yeah.
I came onto this because writing a book is something that I hope to do someday in the future. And I like, obviously, I've always been interested in writing, but I've never really looked into it or really taken it seriously.
Yeah.
So these sessions have just been great to get actual skills. So for example, I've only ever known a biography or an autobiography. So when you mentioned a fictional biography, I thought, oh, that's interesting. So you can still write about yourself, but just put fictional characters in place of, you know, and I think that's a good way to approach sharing your story if you're a bit afraid of putting yourself out there, the world to know. So you can still tell your story without saying this is actually me in a way. Is that correct in terms of fictional biography?
Yes, that's brilliant, Jemima. And I would say that's something that was my train of thought when writing Shattered. There's a lot of hard-hitting things in there. It's a lot to deal with for someone to read, especially family members and things like that. So I went down the route of fictional biography, and I made sure I included in that. Right, okay, so what I'd like you to do is, this is some thinking. I only want you to be in these breakout rooms for about 3 minutes, just to talk to each other, get to know each other a bit better. You don't have to share anything personal, so don't feel like you need to. This is just a broad general question, but I'd like you to have a think about, how do we know that we are ready to tell our story, and how can we explore our story? What's a safe way to explore our story? So this is where Joy's technical abilities come in. If she can just kind of put everyone into breakout rooms for 3 minutes, if that's okay. And then it should automatically bring you back in after that. So how do we know that we are ready to tell our story, and how can we explore our story?
Okay. No momento. Okay, so if
have you done that, yeah?
Almost.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, no? It's okay if it's not working, we can do it in the chat.
I'm just signing. It should give everyone a little
okay.
button now to join a room.
Brilliant. Great. So is that going? Yeah, just join, click join on your screen.
Therese is. Oh, hi, Emily.
Hello, sorry to join late.
That's okay. So what I'm going to do straight away.
Say hi.
Okay. I'm going to add you to a group. We're just doing group work. Repeat the question for her again, Naomi, whilst I just assign her to
So, yeah, so what I'd like you to do in your group is just discuss, how do you know that you're ready to tell your story, and how can you explore your story in a safe way?
Great.
So then you'll go into a group and just discuss it. There's a few people that you should be able to join in a group.
I'll put you in straight away.
Oh, that's chill. Thank you.
So Therese, you've said the breakout rooms do not have closed group unless there is 2 integrations. What are the next steps to participate? That's fine. So I've got room 2 is asking me a question, so I'm just going to run in there. But Naomi, Therese can only just type. So I don't know if you're able to.
Yeah, I'll type.
There.
Yeah, I'll do that now.
Hello.
Hey.
I saw that someone asked asked a question. Oh, are you by yourself in here?
I think I'm with 2 other people.
Yes, no one has spoken yet.
No, I wasn't sure what we're supposed to be doing.
So you're meant to be, well, basically you're meant to be talking to each other to see, now you've asked me to say
Is it where she said now over to you, and
why
when do you know
the story is important?
Okay, yeah. So we just discussed that between us.
Yeah. Hi, iPhone and first last. Are you there? Oh no.
iPhone. Let's say, my name is Sean. I think what we're supposed to be doing is discussing how we know we're ready to tell our story, and how we can do that safely.
Okay.
So I've had a real life experience, and I want to write my autobiography but I have started.
Emotive for us. I don't know if you've ever heard about writer's block or anything like that before. It's basically when you don't feel like you're ready to share a story, or you want to write something but you're struggling to get anything down on paper. I've experienced that myself, and I've realized that I'm an emotional writer. I can draw as well, but I'm an emotional drawer. I can't draw off the top of my head without any emotion attached to it, and I can't write without any emotion attached to it. It has to be attached to emotion. That's just me. Some are very different and can kind of switch it on and off, which is fine too. Learn what type of writer you are, and then we go with that as well. So yeah, that's brilliant. And if you are feeling like you're ready to tell your story, but you do have writer's block, for instance, but you know that you're ready and you really, really, really want to do it, as you said there, that you struggle with that in the chat, I would encourage you to make a plan, because that might help. So it might be that you might be a writer where you just need to get started, and then you'll be able to carry on, because then it will flow from there. So if you make a plan, we'll go on to talking about making a plan, then that might help with that as well.
Quite a question, Amy.
Yeah.
So would you say that there is a good place to okay, so for example, let's say if I'm going through something, I'm like, I need to write a book. Do you think it's wise to start at that point? Or would you say go through the process first, and then when you're at a stable place, take your time, think back, then start writing? What would you say?
So I would say we're going to go back to my PowerPoint, because you've led me nicely onto that. Thank you very much, Joy. And we will cover everything that we've just talked about in a bit more detail. So I've got a quote by me. It might end up being famous, so take it down. Everyone has a story worth telling. They just need to find the right key. So things to consider when telling the story. Are you ready? Realistically, are you ready? Opening up that box is difficult. It's not an easy process. So it's really important that the time that you decide to start writing your story is not the time that you decide to start sharing your story, okay? So they're very different. So that you might start writing, and as I think Rachel said earlier, journaling. You might start by journaling first. Whatever way you decide to start jotting down ideas or sharing your story with a piece of paper or a laptop only, then I say that you could, and it's worth acknowledging that is a separate time to a time when you decide to share your story. Consider the feelings and emotions that are attached to your story. For everyone that has their own story, which is all of you, there'll be different feelings attached to that, and they'll be strong. Sometimes we feel like we're over something and we're ready, but they're triggers, and these triggers can kind of come out of nowhere, especially if we thought something was kind of long gone, and they can disable us a little bit when we go through that process. So always think about the feelings and the emotions that are attached to telling your story. And healing. So as Joy said, are we ready? Are we at a place where we're fully healed and restored? The thing about telling a story is, especially when it's your own, that can be part of your healing process. But there's a fine line between it being part of your healing process and it being part of kind of making you feel a bit disjointed in the end. So it's really important. These are things that I suppose you would need to reflect on and maybe talk to someone about more before starting, especially if the story that you went through, the life story that you went through was quite traumatic, that you want to tell and share with the world. And also consider those involved and their reaction. Our stories do not just include us. Our stories include other people. And when our stories include other people, it means that they kind of get a say in what we're sharing in a way. I don't know if you believe so, if you agree with me, share. What do you think? What are you thinking in the chat, or you can share with me through the mics verbally. Do other people get a say in our story? Do you think they would if you share your story?
Is there a way to write story?
Say that again, sorry.
I was asking if there's a way to write from like a point of view of just solely yourself, not
Yeah.
obviously there's people included in your story, but can you write it from a perspective of you looking at them and not including them in your story?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and it's I would say there's a way you can do that, but it depends on the type of story you're trying to tell. So once you decide on the way you're going to tell that story, so as we talked about in the beginning about biographies and autobiographies and fictional autobiographies, it might be that you decide to either tell it from a fictional standpoint, so everyone has new names, and then that kind of gets around it, or you could tell it from, I suppose, an autobiographical standpoint, where it's a story, but you kind of put the spin on it where it's just you looking out at the world and how it affects and impacts on you. You can do it. It takes a lot of creativity, but it's definitely doable. I mean, I don't know how many people here are Christians or have another religion and tell testimonies. That's what we do all the time. We kind of don't say anyone else's name and just use like our own point of view. And that's the only way I can kind of give an example from that point of view, that we do that a lot really when we share, I suppose, our life story in that way. So yes, it can be done, but you've got to be very, very creative to do it in the way that you use your words. I'm just checking the chat again.
Yeah, someone had asked.
Can I
is
say?
it possible to... Oh, sorry.
Yes.
I was just going to say, can I say something?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. You probably recognize the voice.
I do.
But I was
Hello,
going to say,
Pastor Sean.
Bless you, ma'am. I've started my own personal autobiography, but it was interesting when you asked about how you tell your story, because I believe I still have a couple of chapters of my life that I can talk about because of how they might affect somebody that is living. Some things, although you want to write about them, it's not fair to hurt on other people. So sometimes I call them my hidden chapters that I don't think I can write about yet, but they may come later on in life. So I just wanted to share that. Yeah,
thank you. And I appreciate that point of view and that experience as well, which is a real life experience, and it's brilliant. I think, as you said that, I am definitely in agreement. There's parts of my story that are not in my book because some of them aren't relevant and some of them are too much about other people, and it wasn't enough about me for me to add that into my story. We've got first has said, I agree as well, but that doesn't mean you can't tell the story as you view it. And yes, that's very true. You can tell a story as you view it. It's just taking into account that other people, I suppose what I would like to share is just take into account not everyone will like your story when they read it. And as long as you are at a point where you are healed and you're okay with that, then that's okay. But not everyone is there. So just be mindful, because I don't want to push you into a place where you tell your story and then it does more harm to you than good. But I also want you to tell your story as well. So it's a very fine balance, because I do believe that we shouldn't leave this world with our story. There's someone that needs it. So it's just that balance of knowing when to start, really, and it's not a question of if but when. So thank you.
Question. Oh, sorry, I got a quick question from Rose. Is it possible that one can start writing without a title?
Oh, sorry, yes, I didn't see that one.
Yeah.
Yes, so of course, definitely. And also you might find that your title changes. So you could start with a title and then end up with a completely different one at the end. A title is something to consider just from the point of view of focus and having that focus when you're writing, but it doesn't mean that you need a title to start. Some people have started at the end and gone backwards. Some people start at the beginning and go forward. Some people just start with whatever comes to them and go from there. I'm kind of 1 to 10 kind of person, so I start at the beginning and go through. But it's completely up to you how you do that, as long as you get there in the end. It's always good to have someone to proofread it as well, who I suppose won't be biased in a sense and will help you to kind of get to where you need to be without being negative about it, because you are sharing something that is really sensitive to you. Even if you are ready, it's still sensitive to you as well. Yeah. So what I want you to do now.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
Selena had a hand up.
Oh, sorry, Selena.
It was just on the point of like how to share your story when it includes other people. And like Dad said, they are alive still and it might impact them. I think when you are healed, you tell your story differently to how you would when you're still hurting. When you're hurting, you tend to speak from pain, and that then you might say a lot of negative things about a person, but when you're healed, you speak more about the lessons that you've learned. So it's kind of centered on what you've been through, what you've gained from it, what you've learned, what you will share with someone else. And the focus is not heavy on the other person to the point where the reader might not even consider who the person is, who you might be talking about, what happened, when did it happen. They're so focused on you and how you survived it and what you went through and what you learned from it and where you are now, that their mind goes in that direction. So I do definitely believe it's possible to share your story without it harming other people and their reputation. But I do think it's important to start to share it from a place of being healed and for the right reasons as well. Like sharing your story because you want to help others, as opposed to sharing it because you want to expose what people did to you, because then that's what the narrative will sound like, I guess.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate that point of view. And it goes back to what we said about being healed before, and that's why there's two questions, I suppose, that have come out of this conversation in the workshop, and it's, when do I start writing my story for myself and as part of my healing process, and when do I share my story with others? And those are two good questions that you could ask yourself before sharing it or before starting, which is completely up to you, but definitely try to get to the point of healing before starting. I don't know if, I mean, we use this word healed. I don't know what you think, if you think this word healed, what it means to you. If you want to quickly say in the chat, where would you be when you're healed? How do you know that you're kind of healed and ready to share your story? Has anyone got any advice on that? When do you know you're over a traumatic experience? How do you get over a traumatic experience? Are we just talking about traumatic experiences? Not all stories are about trauma. So what do you think? Is there anything that you want to say on that?
I was thinking more on, literally, I was just on the back of what Selena said. Whilst I think that I'm healed, or whilst I know that I'm healed, if I'm putting out a story that involves somebody else, it might actually take me to, because it might cause upset because I don't know where they are in their journey. I might feel like, oh, I'm all good. But when I start this story, which is now out there and I've pretty much made them vulnerable, you know, how they react, I need to be prepared for that as well, and how everybody else would take the fact that I've kind of dragged them back in. And it's whether, I guess that will be the truth on whether I'm actually healed or it's just a new trauma that's starting, or I don't know.
Yes, and it's a good point. And that, again, is how you tell that story. Because if you tell that story as you, even if that person reads the story that was involved in whatever the situation is, if it's from you and it's from the place of you telling the story and kind of there's no blame, it's just a story, as in like a life story, then there's less likelihood of that person, I suppose, reacting negatively to the story. And I say that just from experience of telling my own story, fictionally and non-fictionally. That's just been my experiences, and the people that are involved in those stories have read the books, and the reaction hasn't been negative, because I suppose on one hand it was true, but it wasn't the whole truth and nothing but the truth. I use fiction as well, so it helps to kind of balance with that as well. So yes, I'd say all good points, all really important, and all really things that I'd say to consider, definitely. Just reading the chat again. I don't know where I've got up to. I think I got up to by Rachel. I think Rachel's had to leave. So I'd say you're ready when your intentions are pure for writing it. Brilliant. When you ask yourself, why am I doing this and who will benefit? Great, thank you, Selena. I believe as well that writing it from a healed platform would be more beneficial as you write it without blaming anyone. Excellent, yeah, which is what we just said. Thank you, Riz. I tend to tell my story more than writing it based off the situation and the people. Thank you, Chris. So in terms of writing the story based on the situation and the people, because have you got an example? It doesn't have to be a personal one that's happened with you. Have you got any examples, just so that we could discuss that in more detail? It does seem like a really interesting point, and I'd just like to pick up on it if you can, Chris. While Chris is writing that, I would like you to have a think about how you can start your story. Chris, are you ready? Are you going to talk to us? Yeah.
Yes, I can talk.
Okay. Brilliant.
Okay. So my job, I'm in Chicago, first of all. So I work with residents who have a difficult time finding employment.
Yes.
And a lot of them feel as though either it's too late to start working, or they made a lot of bad choices to lead up to the point where they wasn't working, or they've been incarcerated.
Okay.
So that's when I feel like I could share my story, because I've been incarcerated. I made bad choices finding employment. So I share with them the journey I went through and where I'm at now to encourage them. And some of them break down crying, get emotional, saying they need to hear that. And some of them don't want to hear it at first, but then come back and thank me for telling them that, because they didn't feel like they was alone going through that, or felt judged, because I could walk through their shoes too.
Yeah. Great, thank you for sharing that. And that's exactly what it is. So writing your story in a book format is an extension of telling your story and telling your experiences as you do that. So thank you, Chris, for that great example. I would like us to have a think about how we can start to tell our story. We're not going to have long to think about that. So can we just put some answers in the chat, if that's okay? How would you tell your story? How could you start? Even if there's no right or wrong answer. So even if you think, oh gosh, I haven't got a clue, that's fine. Just have a think about it. I think, how could you start? What would you do to start? Where would you start? And once you have a think about that, if you can start typing in the chat. We'll only do this for a couple of minutes and then.
Hi there.
Hiya.
Hi. I don't have any experience of writing stories, but I did mention it before in the breakout room. So in terms of writing a story, I feel from my point of view, to kind of start off, is what I've been getting is where I've like been triggered with just a few words that pop up from like colors and nature. That is kind of like a connection to my experiences, and trying to write that down as quickly as possible so I don't miss that opportunity, or if not, record myself and just pick it up as I go along.
Yeah. Brilliant, thank you, Samira. And I love what you said about recording yourself as well, because we haven't said that yet, have we? And we're all talking about writing and typing and things like that. But it's really important to know that if you don't like writing, or you feel like typing on a laptop would be too slow as opposed to time that you're processing what you want to say, you can voice record yourself. Even on Word now, on most computers, you can actually just click the voice record and speak into the laptop. So I'm telling you this because I can't believe 7 books in to publishing, I randomly see voice record at the top of my Word document after I've been writing for hours. And I was like, oh my gosh, I could have done this ages ago. So yeah, if you do need to do it that way where you're typing, just click voice record as well, just to give yourself a break from that. Definitely. Thank you for sharing that. So we've got some more in the chat as well. Chris, I start by, I think it's gone up. Let me just go back up. It's just moved as everyone's typing. I start by stating how I was and discuss who I used to be, then talk about how my life changed for the better, and then talk about who I am now and the journey I'm still on. Brilliant, thank you. The recording sounds like a good idea. Maybe start by sharing it with people verbally as an encouragement. And when you see the impact, it may cause you to realize what parts of your story they need to hear. That's good, yeah, brilliant, thank you. Also, journaling may be a really helpful way whilst you're going through things. So when you write it later on, you can connect with how you were feeling at the time. When I wrote my first book, the words came to me, and when they did, I would write them on my notes or on my phone or my laptop, whenever they came to me. When the words stopped coming, then I started writing, and I knew it was complete. Thank you very much, Stina. So we've got another author here. Don't know if anyone else is an author, but that was another first-hand experience of how they've written their book. So yeah, I do really appreciate that and the feedback on that one. And so I'm going to just go back and just give you a bit of a structure now on where to start with writing your story. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. And from Benjamin Franklin, a quote: "If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail." I don't know if you've heard that before. It's quite a important quote that helps with just making planning really work for you. So give yourself a specific time and day timetabled for writing. So something that I always do is that if I'm going to write, I make sure that I've got discipline, because it's really needed for writing a book, especially. So for me, I am more fluent in the mornings. So I'll get up and it'll be, I don't know, 5 a.m. every morning, and I'll write for an hour. Or I'll say to myself, I'm going to write 1 chapter a week. Depending on your, I suppose, responsibilities and what you do, you'd have to make it work around your own schedule. Give yourself goals, make sure your goals are achievable. Make sure they're realistic as well. So the worst thing to do is set yourself up to feel like you've failed in a certain situation. So whenever you do decide to write, just let it be kind of achievable for you in your current circumstances. You can kind of have a book title to help with the theme and the ideas. You might decide to dedicate your book to someone. This is something that some people do. I've done it myself in some of my books, and in others I haven't. So it just depends on if the book is specific to a person or someone that helps you through something. I don't know. It's really personal to you, that is having a dedication page. You would have your introduction in the book or a foreword. And the foreword is a piece of writing that serves to introduce the reader to the author of the book. So the foreword isn't actually written by you, it's someone else who you get to write that. And then you have your chapter titles, and then a blurb for the back of the book, which is just for promotional purposes. It tells you what the book's about. It's a description of the book. And then this is the creative bit, which I love, which is the front cover designs and ideas. And obviously, if you're going to have pictures inside the book as well, it includes that. You need to think about a designer who's going to help you to design the book. A publisher, how are you going to publish your book? So I self-publish my books, and I do that through KDP on Amazon. So I get the graphic designer is Bamboo Creative, and he designs all of my books and does all of my illustrations on the books that I have. And if you do decide to, I don't know, look into me a bit, advertising when I've advertised one of my books, so you'll be able to find him that way. If not, contact me and I can send you over his details as well. And then lastly, think of a price. So think of a price. What do you want your price to be? What I'd like you to do now is think about, I suppose, self-care. If you could just go into your breakout rooms for 5 minutes, please. Joy will do that for you. I want you to have a think about how can you take care of yourselves when writing your story? Because self-care is one of the most important things of this whole process. How do you take care of yourself? You're about to write your story. How would you take care of yourself to get there? So if you could go into your breakout rooms just for 5 minutes and just have a talk about that, and then we'll feed back. And Joy will give you an invitation to that, to those breakout rooms. Thank you. Has everyone been able to see the invitation to the breakout room?
Yes.
Great, brilliant. Everyone's in the breakout room.
Hey.
Great. So, is there anything that we
No one wants to leave their groups.
yeah.
They'll get kicked out soon.
There's been some really good points in the chat though. Really, really good points.
Like, very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
Hello everyone. Is that everyone back, or I think so? Yeah. I was just talking to Joy and just saying there's so much that goes into, you know, the whole decision to tell your story, and when you tell your story, when do you write it, when do you share it, kind of thing. And they're all very different, and they don't come one after another, as in straight away. So you might write your story and not share it for 10 years. It just depends on the circumstances, who's involved, how they feel. And then and it's kind of, I was saying, like, it's difficult because I want to say you should be able to just go up to the person and say, well, I'm writing the story and you will be in it, but it won't be in that way, and I won't kind of like make everyone realize it's you. But the thing is, in reality, everyone heals at different stages in their life, and that person may not be ready to even speak about what you're ready to write about. So I suppose something that I've always had to stand by is accountability. If I write something, I have to be accountable for what I've written. I take responsibility for that, and I also take responsibility for the repercussions of it. And I say that soberly with a lot of wisdom, because it's easy to say and just say, well, I don't care and I'm doing this, but I say it from a point of view of actually I will write in a responsible way, without trying to cause harm or danger to others in the same instance, really. So back to yourselves and how you feel. How do you take care of yourself while writing a story? Because it will trigger emotions. Anyone got any feedback for us?
Well, from group 1,
yeah,
we talked about doing lots of different things, like from a physical aspect, like having a comfortable chair, sort of allocating a specific space where you write so that it helps you to get into writer's mode. If you have like a room, for example, when you're in that room, you're in writer's mode. And when you leave that room, you're not in writer's mode, you're just sort of doing the rest of life. But also, if you're writing about a story that's takes you to like a stressful place, to sort of balance that out somehow. If you are feeling, if it takes you to a stressful place, then, you know, kind of have some treats, have like a donut or a cup of tea, or you know, go for a walk, or, you know, if it wasn't locked down, you know, go to the gym, or, you know, go to the sauna or something like that, do something to kind of balance out some of those stressful, revisiting like stressful events and things.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. There's so much there. Something that one of the things you reminded me of, Shan, with that is we should really probably not write before we go to sleep, just so that it doesn't impact on our sleep, really. So if you do something else before you sleep, so if you write in the evening because that's the best time and that's when your creative juices are flowing, that's okay, but then just make sure it's not before you fall asleep. Do something in between that's part of your self-care routine. If you haven't got an evening self-care routine, you should have an evening self-care routine to improve your sleep anyway. So hopefully if you haven't, you'll find something that works for you. Anyone else got anything to add to that?
We spoke about, I posed the question, why is that relevant? Because I didn't understand the question. But then we spoke about having the mental capacity to actually deliver what you're saying, and also having somebody to hold you accountable. I know you said you hold yourself accountable, but having somebody else who will hold you accountable and looking into, like when you said about proofreading, they could also read you as well. And just making sure that you're ready for the repercussions of the book, negative feedback, good criticism, just being prepared mentally for all of that. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you for that, Crystal. So, as you know, we're made up of not just our physical person. We've got emotion as well. We've got intellect, our mind, our spirit, and everything like that. So we need to take care of the whole person. We can't just take care of one part of it. So as much as we're writing, and that's a physical thing, emotionally, it will be, as I said, triggering and taking us back to a place where we might not have been in a while, especially if we're writing from our experiences in childhood. There's so much attached to that. I think I remember someone saying that they're triggered by nature and things around them. That's so true. We're triggered by smells, by sounds, by music. There's so many things that we're triggered by. And as that's happening, we need to make sure that we are ready, like you say, Crystal, and available to deal with that and take care of ourselves at the same time. I think, was someone going to say something, or?
I was going to say, we also spoke about, as you're making yourself vulnerable through your story, to have someone, I guess like a confidant, someone who you trust, who can read sections of it for you at a time, especially for the process from starting to write it until it's completed and put into other people's hands, might be a while. And when you kind of start telling your story, you might start to overthink it and start feeling like, oh, I've shared too much, or I'm not shared it in the right way, or people are going to think I'm silly for saying this, or I'm going to be embarrassed. Just so many things will come to your mind, which can be really discouraging and demotivating, especially if you were really excited and really felt like you were ready to share. So having someone who can just read it for you and encourage you throughout the process can be really helpful. Especially them reading it from a different point of view, they'll be able to see it, and they could maybe even say, actually, the way you shared this may not come across well to other people, so maybe you could reword it in this way. And if it's someone that you trust, they won't be tearing your work down and say like it's rubbish or whatever. They'll be saying like they'll value the fact that you've shared it, but also maybe give you a way that you could share it better, that might sit well with people, might be received differently. So having that person to kind of walk through the journey of writing it with you might be useful to help with your self-care and like protecting your mind against the negativity and the doubts and everything that will come before you actually publish it.
Yeah, thank you. And we've not really shared that, have we? I suppose the doubt and that. And I can't tell you that it's easy writing your story, because it isn't. And even when writing my story, I had a lot of doubts and was like, oh gosh, have I written that right? Or actually don't read that. For the person that was reading mine, don't read that one, I've done it again, so read this one, or like literally going back and forth, and that does happen, and it's part of the process of writing, but it's also kind of, yes, someone else can encourage you, but being able to reaffirm yourself as well, and be confident that what you're writing is what kind of you want to write, and it's what you kind of want to share with others, knowing that it's more than just how it makes you feel or how it makes you look. It's more than that, it's bigger than that. It's about actually helping other people to go through their own process, their experiences, what they're going through in life, that maybe you have gone through it and they can look at you and say, if you've gone through it, I can go through it. The amount of times I've heard that from people who have read my story. I mean, about a year ago, I was on the phone to an IT operator just because I needed to renew my Microsoft subscription, and they were like, "Are you Naomi Samuel?" I'm Williams now, but I was Samuel. And I said, "Oh, I was, yeah." And they said, "Oh my gosh, you wrote Shattered. That book was amazing." I do not have a clue who was on the other side of the line or anything, but just the fact that they were able to share how much that book touched them and helped them in their life, it just reminds you why you write. It reminds you why you share your story. Or like Chris said, it reminds you why you share like your testimony and your own experiences with other people, because that's what it's about really, with all of that. Thank you for that. Is there anyone else who wants to share anything? Okay, so what I would like you to do is, for the last bit, before we end, I'd like you to have a look at my screen and just write in the chat or talk. It's completely up to you to share this. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, as I said before, just retelling the trauma, maybe re-traumatizing. So therapists everywhere say this. So just by retelling your story, or just by retelling what you've been through, could easily re-traumatize you every single time you go through that process again of retelling it, because you're taking your mind back to a place where you experienced that situation. So just bear that in mind. And as you have a think about that, I want you to look at the screen. There's lots of different things on the screen: positivity, adventure, a deep breath, trust, kind, a hug, patience, love, bravery, fun, peace, strength, connection, forgiveness, time, energy, luck, courage, happiness, a break, health. I want you to have a think. What would you take to end? What can you take with you to end today's workshop? And as you have a think about what you take with you, I'd like you to write it in the chat. And I'm going to give you 1 more minute to have a think about that and write it in the chat. And then I'll stop sharing my screen and have a read of what you said. Okay, so I'll stop sharing my screen now. And we'll now have a look through what you've got in the chat. So, Chris, patience and courage, thank you. Brilliant. Crystal time, thank you. First, I'd like to take confidence, thank you. Creative, I'd like to take peace and strength. Jemima, patience and courage, thank you. Maxine, patience, thank you. Selena, that everyone has a story and it is worth telling. Thank you, Selena. Samira, adventure and patience. Chan, courage and confidence. Thank you, Chan. Rose, confidence, positivity, and strength. And Maxine, peace. Selena, the courage to tell it and the strength to tell it. Thank you. Dominique, peace, happiness, and positivity. Brilliant. And I would like to take time. I would love to take time from there. And I say that because with everything that you've said, I agree with. And I also believe that these things take time. There's no rush to tell your story. So take your time with it, and take it easy as you do so as well. And I'll just share my screen one last time just so that you can see how to contact me and just what you'd normally have at the end, which is any questions. So is there any questions at this time that anyone has? I'm just going to turn my light on. It's gone dark in here. I've literally sat here and I've got darker and darker on the screen. So as you're thinking of questions, I'll go and turn on my lights. Hopefully that's a bit better. Yeah, there we go. Not fading into the background anymore. So there's my contact details if you need to ask me anything directly, but I don't know if you should already have Creative Mouthpiece's contact details. If not, she'll put them in the chat. If you need to contact her about any more workshops, I'm sure there'll be more to come at some point. It's a brilliant idea. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen again, and so I can look and see if there's any questions. Is there any questions? What was my greatest challenge in telling my story and how did I overcome it? So for me, Shattered was my first book that I ever wrote. I wrote it in 2015 and I started writing it 7 years earlier and I couldn't write it. And the reason why I couldn't write it is because I was still going through it. I had to completely finish, I suppose, the process of that story before I could write it. And even though I had the idea, I had the title Shattered all the way back then, I had the chapter names and I lost the chapter names, I couldn't find them again, had to rename it. And so much happened in 7 years, but I just wasn't ready to write it emotionally. And so I had that writer's block. I would sit down to write it because I am so, I suppose, organized and I try really hard to be disciplined. So I was like, right, I'm going to sit down and do this and I'll do it every day at this time. But I just wasn't ready, so I couldn't do it. So I'd say the biggest challenge with that was overcoming, I suppose, my expectation of writing it within a certain time frame and letting it just kind of be there until it was time. And then once I wrote it, I ended up writing it in 3 months after that. So something that took me 7 years to get my first sentence down, I ended up then writing it in 3 months. And then I didn't write again for, I would say, 2 years. I'd say a year and a half, and then I wrote Shameless. And then I didn't write again for probably another year. And then all the other books I wrote in 2020. So literally then it all just kind of came. So, but I know that after that, I know that there'll be a time again where I can't write again for a bit and I'll have to take it for a couple of years or 10 years or however long it takes. Am I a full-time writer? I think I could, sorry, yeah, I could just see in that one. So am I a full-time writer? So now I am a social worker and I have an organisation for children and young people with disabilities and additional needs called Sensory Learning and Play, CIC. So I'm a managing director alongside my mum, Maxine, who is also a managing director, and we run that organisation. And then I'm also a social worker. I work with children and young people with mental health needs. Just checking if there's any more questions. I really hope, and I can see lots of thank yous and stuff. I really appreciate Joy for putting this on and for giving you the opportunity to, I suppose, develop a skill that is in all of us, really. I really do hope that you're able to write your own stories, publish and share them. It's such a gift that you can leave this world. It's really important, really. I find the time by... I don't know. I do actually sleep as well, so that's a good thing. But I find the time by just being very organised with my time and disciplined. I've learned to juggle over the years. So yeah,
that's incredible.
Expectations. So thank you.
From a social worker perspective, and with children as well. That's incredible. So,
yes, I do. I don't know if you heard my son in the background. So I have a 12-year-old and I have a 1-year-old, and they were all sent upstairs at 6:30 to their beds, but that's a normal time they go up anyway, so it wasn't much change.
Okay. That's good. Thanks for that.